Welcome back to another episode of the Phoenix Founders Podcast. I'm here with Jeff Kukowski.
Yes,
Your last
thank
name.
you.
Your last name's fun to say.
It
Kukowski.
rolls off the tongue.
It rolls
doesn't
off the tongue. Yeah.
That's right.
Jeff is the CEO of a company called Ori. We recently invested in. I'm really excited about this company. I want to go back to your background, but before we do, can you give us a quick overview of what's Ori, and
Sure.
then we'll go through the Jeff career trajectory here.
Yeah. So I also want to say I'm excited to have Phoenix Ventures as part of the Ori family as well.
Thank you.
So I want to say that up front. And, what does Ori do? It does identity and access management. So what does that mean to a non-technical user? Well, when you go to work, it's how you log on. At home, it's how you log into ChatGPT or into your T. Rowe Price banking account. If you're a partner, many times it's seamless and behind the scenes if you're doing business with partners, but identity and access management helps solve workforce, B2B, and consumer use cases. It's going further now to treat agents that want to do meaningful work to make an agent feel like a customer, essentially. So that can be secure, it can be audited, and agents can start being a part of the community as well. So it's people and machines and agents, and it's login, essentially.
It does feel like the age of AI agents is going to have a tremendous impact on identity and access management. So we'll jump into that here in a minute. Here. You are a GTM-oriented, like a growth-oriented CEO. I'm always curious. Take me back to when you were in high school or like a younger man here, maybe even grade school. Was there any indication, A, you were going to be a leader, a CEO, and B, a growth-oriented guy? Were you selling stuff as a kid?
Gosh, how much time do we have? I think a lot of things come out of necessity and also who you are. I come from a working class family on the south side of Chicago. I can't remember when I wasn't working or hustling, looking to wash a car, clean up after dogs, mow lawns, shovel snow. Was a pretty popular thing when I was a kid, in Chicago. And, I've been working and been my own entrepreneur my entire lifetime. And I think some of that comes out of just necessity. Some of it comes out of desire, right? So we had everything we needed as kids, a family of 3 boys. But for the things that you wanted, you needed to go figure out a way to do it, which is much like any company. And the necessity with any company of any size is growth, right? So,
I don't want to go off on a tangent too much, but the parent in me can't help but ask this question a little bit. Do you think it's harder? I mean, I had a lot of jobs like that too as a kid. I, had a paper route when I was 8 years old, 9 years old, I think. And then like multiple times where I had paper routes and did a lot of things around the neighborhood. Do you think it's harder for kids these days to have that same working experience for whatever reason?
I think as a parent as well, it's much harder.
And why is it harder? Is it us or is it?
I think there are far more distractions, and I think we continue to build, distractions en masse, right? So, I remember traveling to Korea early in my career, and I was intrigued by a whole bunch of people in Korea walking around staring at a phone. Now, this was before the iPhone in the United States, right? So in Korea, they had a lot of content that people could consume on a phone, especially in a major city like Seoul. I'm like, this is really weird. And if you look at it today, regardless of where you are, if you're a kid, if you're an adult in traffic, or even driving on the highway, unfortunately, people are consumed by the distractions of their phone, and it's only becoming faster. It's harder for kids, right? Because there's so much great stuff you can find online these days. So, I think it is harder.
Yeah,
it's my short answer.
I love it. Yeah. So, grew up on the south side of Chicago. What happened after high school? Where'd you go to college? And walk me through early career. And I'm always interested in most of the people listening to this. There's 3 people listening to this total. And so I'm one of them. So there's really only 2 other people. But no, most of the people listening to this are going to be founders, particularly with some affinity to Arizona, but they're founders or company builders or people around the startup ecosystem. in general. I'm always interested in the take of the lessons learned about leadership, about growth, about company building. So we'll try to pull some of those out in the conversation. But walk me through some of your early school and career experiences, college, early career experiences, that and what you learned from those things, and what were some of the takeaways, and how that kind of pivoted you to your next opportunity.
Sure. So my undergraduate studies were at Northwestern University in Chicago. I rode crew at Northwestern. I was a runner prior to that. I worked to pay my way. It was a pretty expensive school. Again, coming from a working class family, it's necessity is to work while you went to school as well. At the same time, leaving Northwestern, I started my first incorporated company. And of all things, it was installing cedar fences and decks, which is the way I paid my way through high school and into college. It was a part of the way that I could afford to do some things. And that company failed. And my first company, as strange as it may be, was the only company where I got an offer. It was a really bad time coming out of university at that time, and it was in a tech company, and it was in this is going to date me. It was in a company that was still in the mainframe and mid-range era. Most people listening to this podcast won't know what that means, right? So early career was into a really good program at a reasonably sized software company.
In sales?
They had a program that brought in associates mainly from Ivy League schools. I was, I guess, technically a safety school. I didn't know what an Ivy League school was until I went to college. But
I think you did okay at Northwestern. It's a good school.
Thank you. It is a good school.
Great school.
I appreciate that. But I was part of an associate program that rotated us through every function of a software company. So we coded things. We were part of marketing. We were part of product management. We were part of sales. We were part of finance, and we would rotate through functions. But I was originally hired to be a go-to-market person, and landed. My first official job was essentially a BDR, which is the best place on the planet to start. It's hard as hell.
Yeah,
it's hard as hell. But you learn the cadence of just doing the work, because it's a low probability of success in many cases, calling into companies that may have an interest for whatever reason. So you learn a lot about just doing the work. You learn a lot about positioning and listening and timing and figuring out how to get that hook in around something that might be more urgent or compelling or interesting for the person on the other side of the phone.
A couple really interesting things there that I would pull out. That cross-functional associate program is really powerful. Being able to see different functions, have a full view on inside a company. On the BDR point, I love you've obviously got to be great at inquiry, discovery, to be good at that job, and that's the best leaders are always great at discovery and inquiry and listening in general, but. Specific to the BDR job, in the age of AI and the promise of AI-oriented BDRs, just not to fast forward here too much, but has that job changed that much since you started in a BDR role back then? This was probably in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
You started a BDR role.
Well, actually, no, I'm not that old.
Okay,
right?
I'm that old.
But it was 90s.
I'm that old, 90s.
Or early 90s.
Early 90s. Sorry.
No worries.
But back then, is that job changed that much actually compared to now? Like some of the attributes are really not that different.
Yeah, I think the bulk of the job is the same. Maybe it's better informed, right? Yeah. Maybe there's some help with different data sources. I think there'll be some help with AI for sure. I think agents can maybe soften the road. Provide maybe a better probability depending upon all of the data. But the core job is still the same.
In a complex sale, will we ever? I think in a kind of transactional sale, I could see BDRs going away. But just out of curiosity, do you think in a complex sale, are there ever not going to be human BDRs?
No, and even Ori being an open source play, even kind of running the parallel side of product-led growth with open source. The difference on a complex enterprise sale really is trust, and it really is people, and it really is, I'm about to trust my entire front door experience, like my entire consumer experience, as a company like OpenAI or others, that I mentioned. You got to be able to trust the company that you're partnering with, and that's not done in a product-led growth. It may start with product-led growth, but it then comes down to people and trust and whether or not they can depend upon you.
I love that. I didn't mean to fast forward to the Ori situation.
Yeah,
take me back to the 90s here.
Yeah, the 90s.
And so what happened after that job? How long were you there, and then what was next after that?
Yeah, well, in that job, actually, I met actually a couple of mentors that are still mentors today, where I put together, there was one major project at Pansophic. Software companies, technology companies were great at selling. They didn't really understand what it meant. Once you got a customer, how do you keep them? And back then, there was a piece of research from Harvard Business Review, a professor at the Harvard Business School, on the lifetime value of a customer. And one of my projects as an associate at Pansophic was we had a whole bunch of churn, and we didn't quite understand it, because there was really nobody responsible for it. There was no data around it. We just knew that we sold a big customer and they churned. So getting back in, understanding that loss, understanding where we went wrong, understanding how better onboarding, better customer success, a view into what the steps were for success, led to my second ever startup. And a mentor at Pansophic helped me and another associate. We did a startup 2 years into our time at Pansophic. So that led to a company called the Customer Retention Group. It's a great 5-year run, kind of referral first business with some of the largest technology companies in the world back then, which then led into my first executive job with one of my clients in the healthcare space called RIMS, which is now TriZetto.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Now, TriZetto, the healthcare, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And the function I owned was the customer success function. So we, old stuff, gazillions of lines of COBOL running on machines that people wouldn't remember. And they were Blue Cross Blue Shield organizations paying our medical claims. So you think about the mission critical nature of making sure you as a consumer, the claim is right, it gets paid to the doctor, the consumer isn't out. It was my first kind of taste of being at the center of this is really critical stuff. And there's a lot that I learned at RIMS. That company went on to sell, and as I mentioned, is now part of TriZetto. I can keep going.
Yeah, well, were those jobs, were your customer success kind of responsibility at RIMS, was that part of the GTM function, just out of curiosity, or was that more like support, onboarding, et cetera?
We started with it being support. We ended up rolling QA into that function, because if you think about it, if you don't get QA right, you have customer issues. We eventually split the business into kind of larger customers and then all of our steady state customers. So the larger customers may have been 50, 60% of the business, and it may have been 10 or 12 customers. And there was a different gentleman that led that side of the business, and then I led kind of the steady state, hundreds of customers side of the business.
So what was after TriZetto?
I followed a mentor here to Phoenix. It was my first tech startup called Cyclone Commerce.
Yeah.
Followed Kent Petzold and Dave Bennett, who are part of the community.
Now, Kent, I've met Kent along the way. Did he? Am I remembering incorrectly? Was that part of Valley Ventures? Was he part of Valley Ventures? That was Jock Holloman?
I think that was after.
Okay.
I think that was after Cyclone.
Okay.
Yeah, Kent had done a number of large software companies, and I met Kent. He was a mentor at Pansophic. He helped me start the Customer Retention Group, which was, as I mentioned, like a 5-year run. And then he gave me a call and he said, look, I'm doing a really interesting startup. The internet was new.
Yep.
The business was kind of dull. But the concept was really exciting, right? So there were these companies, essentially managing their value chains, their supply chains, their partners over back then what was called an EDI, value-added network.
Electronic data interchange.
It had a lot of opportunity, and it was exciting. It was a little bit less than $1 million, but it had some good names behind it, and the people were absolutely phenomenal. Kent included. So I decided to join my first startup.
Well, this would have been like 2000, early 2000s, maybe
Somewhere around there, 2000. Yep.
Yeah, they were. That was like one of the up and coming tech companies, like back then. Like there was the tech community really wasn't that big, and that they were probably one of the leading companies in Arizona then.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of fun. We went through many stages of growth, and the company had an exit to Axway, which is still here in the Valley.
What was the? By the way, on that note, was there outside capital in that company?
There was, and there were angels here, and we were one of the few companies raising money in the Silicon Valley. Back then, it was a big deal to be outside of the Silicon Valley, raising money in the Silicon Valley. So you may know Trinity.
Yeah, they were an investor they were an investor in a company that bought my first company.
Yep.
Tim McAdam
was on our board, and a big part of that journey as well.
Awesome. Yeah, great story.
Yeah.
Blast from the past. I want to go back to one thing you said. I'm always interested in the trajectory of someone's career and how it leads into these leadership roles. But you've already described a series of technical leadership roles. Did you know when you were in college, like were you drawn to technology, or was that more just early career experiences sparked your curiosity?
I was not drawn to technology. Quite literally, back in 1989 when I came out of Northwestern, Northwestern had a great program of bringing companies in, and I interviewed a lot. There weren't a lot of jobs back then. The economy was challenging, and I had a really great friend whom I had run with in high school. And he said, look, I'm at this really great company called Pansophic, and I'd like you to interview. Yeah. And it was by chance that I clicked, got excited. They got excited about me, and I ended up in that job. So it wasn't planned. I think there are different things that happen in life where you just have a little bit of luck. Yeah. And wow, what a great ride it's been since having that little bit of luck and getting into tech kind of by accident.
Well, the amount of learning just in your career that's also what you're doing now, and we'll get to this here in a minute, but when you think about who some of your customers are at Ori and the cutting edge nature of what you're building and where you play, you've had this cross-platform, cross-generation experience, which is really quite unique when you think about, pre-internet, internet, but pre-public cloud, post-public, public cloud and the hyperscalers there, all the way here into AI has been like really quite a trajectory. Like when you think about across those technological shifts, has been quite fascinating.
Well, I agree with you, and I'm drawn to the next new big thing, right? So even in that mix, one of my companies just missed going public, and it was as simple as navigating on your smartphone before there was an iPhone. Just missed. The iPhone came out, magnificent device that it is. That business got sold, right? But it was a near miss, and that was hardware and software. Mm-hmm. Taser and Axon, local company here, hardware and software.
Yeah.
Amazing transformation there, right? With some of the basics of growth that just apply in any kind of company that you do. So I've done many different kinds of companies around what do I think is next and big and promising.
Well, speaking of that, from the Axway, was Axon right after you sold the company, or because Axon's obviously been a huge winner in Arizona.
It's a tremendous company, and it was a great run there. I actually had one company in between. It was called Destinator, and Destinator was location-based services and basically navigation on a handheld in between Cyclone and Axon.
For what use case? Was that use case for logistics, or was the GPS piece, or what was the
company? And again, this happens, I think, even in startups. It had a whole bunch of great ideas and a whole bunch of great technology. Interestingly enough, the location-based services were used on the trucks that did the cleanup for the 9/11 disaster, many years ago, because it was a crime scene. And they had to track every load of rubble that went out of the crime scene. So it had great location-based services technology. It had some great dead reckoning capability and patents around, when you're not in view of a satellite, how do you track somebody indoors, et cetera. But the real market maker for that company was navigation. And back then, when the company was coming up, there were in-car systems that were, if you remember a long time ago, only the high-end cars. And then there were a couple of personal technology vendors, the Garmin's of the world. TomTom is a brand that we had out there. We enabled large manufacturers like Motorola here in town, SK Telecom in Korea, big organizations and telcos to basically allow that service on their branded devices or as part of their service.
Interesting.
And it came so close to going public, and then the iPhone came out.
Yeah.
Right. And those businesses still, there are companies that have made it, right?
Yeah.
But they were more diversified than just the personal navigation.
Yeah, that's tough. That's a tough, maybe perhaps unforeseen technological shift that can really change the trajectory of a company. Let's talk about Axon. I mean, I've met Rick Smith once or twice. I really don't know Rick.
Yeah.
But what a great story of a founder that's persisted all the way through and just continued to launch new products and really change that industry, law enforcement in general. What was your role there? When did you come? How big was the company when you came in, and what was your role at Axon?
Yeah, so phenomenal company and a phenomenal story, and there are probably 1,000 sub-stories to that company. I came in at a time when the company had already gone through a lot of growth. Was the darling on the NASDAQ, and was in a different stage where they were looking for the next idea and the next way to grow from essentially $90 million in revenue and being kind of a weapon-centric business to
more single product, right? Or that more mostly?
They actually had a lot of products.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's actually part of the story, right? Because there are times when you want to contract to what's going to work.
Okay.
And focus.
Yeah.
And we can go deeper on that. And then there are times when you expand. Probably the best company on the planet I've ever worked for in terms of ideation around solving critical needs for their core customers. And back then it was law enforcement. I think they've bridged out quite substantially since then. And back then, the weapon was loved by the people using it because it's a device that saves lives. And they had a bunch of different concepts. They had a camera business, right, called Axon. It was the camera was called an Axon camera. They had a cloud-based digital evidence management business. Back then, the cloud was new.
Yeah.
Law enforcements were laggards. They had put quite a bit of money into that business, and they had not seen growth in probably 4 or 5 years or predictability, and they were a publicly traded company, so the value stayed below $200 million for quite some time. And they had a lot of other products. They had, a shotgun shell incapacitation weapon that would enable you to do, kind of safe incapacitation from distance. They had a distracted driving solution, which I was drawn to because that's still a big problem today. They had a whole bunch of ideas about where they could go. And they essentially needed to focus on the few things that would work, which is, some of what we had done to get the company centered on the 3 things that mattered and to grow it from that point forward.
I'm so interested in this because the number one problem that I probably see in any company we invest in, it actually isn't the lack of ideas or what should we do or where should we go. That happens a little bit, but it's more I've got too many ideas. Whenever I hear a founder pitch me on an idea and they'll say, hey, this has all these use cases, what I really hear is you don't know who your ideal customer profile is,
right.
Or like, I don't want lots of use cases. I want one use case that you can hammer over and over, particularly at the early stage. What's the process to know? Like, how did Axon, or what were the lessons taken away from Axon about how they got even more focused on what was working and doubled down on what was working? But what are some of the lessons for the listeners on how to focus?
I think some of the lessons have to do with data. So back at that time, officers then and still today love the technology that's brought forward by the company because it helps them save lives, protect truth, do those things. And there were lots of other, back then, there are 60, 70 major cities in the United States, which actually make up the largest portion of the sworn law enforcement. Our penetration of that core base was low, and our bottom-up motion through the officer wasn't great. So just by going top-down with the chief and looking at the use cases, the most urgent use cases for that ideal customer profile, a place where they already knew us and trusted us, was the first motion that we got going to bring growth back to the company, was changing the market motion and looking at the total available market. And
because was job number one trying to like win the hearts and minds of the troops, like and connecting with the officers? Is that what you're saying? And then you had to go like, or is it the opposite of what you're saying?
We did an outstanding job with the officers.
Yeah.
We needed to do more with chiefs.
Yeah.
Because, again, even how is the decision made when you talk about complex enterprise cycles, in corporations, many times you might have 6, 10, 12 different people that affect that process. In law enforcement agencies, at least in the U.S., and it varies around the world, you have a few, but ultimately, whether you're hiring more officers, buying more gasoline, buying more vehicles, cars for the police officers, or buying more equipment for them, that stuff all of the major decisions roll up to the chief.
And so showing up with data was key to changing the motion there.
Showing up with data, aligning to what was important for them, asking the questions, listening to them, getting our early kind of thought-leading chiefs who had experienced success, and just kind of merging into cameras and digital evidence management. You always have this crossing the chasm scenario, and we had put a lot of money into the camera side of the business and the digital evidence management side of the business, but we only had limited adoption. And just by saying, okay, what chiefs want to solve this problem of transparency and protecting the officer and protecting the public by putting cameras, it was brand new.
Yeah.
Right? And there was a lot of, I'm not so sure we want to do this. And there were a number of early major city chief thought leaders that grabbed onto the idea and made it real. And through their success, you could then talk to other chiefs about what it meant. And cameras are fairly ubiquitous at this point. Back then they weren't, right? So it wasn't just understanding the data about where to go sell, but it was understanding who you're selling to and what's most important to them. And by the way, in early market stuff for new stuff, there's always this crossing the chasm piece where you've got to get your early adopters to succeed and then tell the story to other people.
Yeah, you can't access the early majority if you don't get the early adopters to succeed.
I think from an operational perspective, it's also important to your earlier concept of all the different use cases. We had to painfully kill a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I don't mean kill in terms of life, but products are really important to people that develop them and engineer them. And it's hard to say this is a fantastic technology. Look, right now there aren't too many people on the planet that are using an application that stops them from using their phone while they're driving. Yeah. It's a fantastic idea that nobody wants to put on their phone.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. Great technology is with and great products with mediocre adoption is actually that's what's hard to kill, right?
Right.
If you have something with really bad performance, it's not hard to say, hey, well, let's just dump this. It's like the middlers, like the average. It's the middlers that make it really hard because. But that's where we ends up sucking a lot of our attention as like founders and leaders of technology companies.
Yeah, and the middlers are the hardest one. I've had a company where we had a strategy around a different future, but the middlers were challenging.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's see here. Well, super. I want to spend some time on Ori and make sure we spend time there. I will say one more thing about Axon. I watch probably more like police shows and FBI related shows than I should. And it's not the true crime stuff. It's really just like the fictional like police show, that I watch.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much the body cam with the Axon logo shows up in these TV shows. I've been fascinated with, like I thought on one hand, is that product placement or is that actually just real body cam footage that the way that it shows up,
Yeah, well, I have to say, I'll say one more thing. Phenomenal company. They're serving, a phenomenal group of people who have a very tough job all around the planet. in law enforcement officers. Again, really smart people. That watermark idea is needed, right? For reasons of auditability and chain of custody. But putting an Axon logo on there was a really smart idea by somebody in the company back then. And just a phenomenal experience for me, and they're still doing beautifully. It's a great company.
I know you, now let's transition to, jump ahead to kind of identity and access management. So you moved out of that role at Axon, but you were leading a company called SecureAuth.
Correct.
Yeah. Tell me about how that happened, and then what were some of the main takeaways, and then spend a couple minutes on that, but then let's bridge into Ori, because I think Ori is pretty exciting here.
So even as a precursor to Ori, SecureAuth was identity and access management. So that was a company invested in by Toba Ventures, Vinny Smith, and a really good crew of investors there. Was growth stage. Right, so about 9 million when I joined, and a company that we had to differentiate against, free from Microsoft. About $1 gazillion going into Okta at the time, with a whole different go-to-market playbook with Andreessen Horowitz behind them. Kind of then legacy players who I think have continued to reinvent themselves, like Ping.
Yeah,
and also kind of startups that started about the same time as us that were much more fit for purpose around a use case, like Duo, that also had an incredible exit. So great start in identity and access management. We grew the company. We weren't for sale, but we had 2 buyers, and it was a really good result for the company.
Great. Well, let's. So that was probably quite informative as far as being able to, when the Ori opportunity came up, to be able to kind of lean into it. But tell us more about Ori, and then and what you're most, like what the product set is today.
Sure.
I think the open source motion is both fascinating, complex, at least from a novice's perspective like mine, and just has incredible opportunity also as a strategy, but a different GTM motion for open source. So give us the color commentary on where Ori is today and where we're going from here.
So to your point, open source, what a tremendous opportunity. Ori started as a series of open source projects, which are still there. They're still vibrant. It's some of the most used open source capabilities out there for companies of all sizes, on up to maybe 20-25% of the Global 5,000. So very big, on down to, I'm new, I've got a startup concept, I want to manage my own identity and access management. I will use Kratos as an IDP, Keto for Zanzibar, fine-grained permissions, Oathkeeper as a proxy, or Hydra for social login, the most widely used OAuth 2 server on the planet. And that concept from our founders really was that we need to make authentication easier. If you think about it, it's still painful.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It's still fraught with security issues. Identity and access management is still the easiest way in for an attacker. And despite a lot of investment going into the area, and our founders had an idea that we can make it so easy and so secure and so scalable and so capable that you could start for free. And eventually, if you needed help or if you needed it managed, you could do that. So open source projects, some of the most widely used open source projects on the planet. It then went into kind of the Andreessen Horowitz playbook. You can either use it for free, or if you need it managed and you need a network that's globally available, if you're an Okta customer or you're a WorkOS customer or you're a Ping customer and you want to replace your solution, today, in most cases, they're a black box SaaS provider, and you basically connect to their service, and you can run your login, anywhere around the globe. And on the Ori network, you can do it with SOC 2 Type 2 security compliance. You can do it with ISO 27001 compliance. It's massively scalable, and we have really large customers around the planet that use the fully managed service, right? So Companies like Hemnet, which is kind of like the Zillow of Sweden. Their entire customer login is on Ori. Axel Springer, largest digital media company in Europe, is using the Ori network to be fully managed and to manage compliance, security, identity and access management, making it easy for their customers to log on. We've recently come up with another play in the playbook just based upon listening to customers. So we have a whole class of companies, large companies, that want to manage their own identity and access management. Why do they want to do that? Because it's that important, especially on the consumer side. So there's a great case study on OpenAI with some video that's going to follow online. They tell just a fantastic story about how important their front door is and all the things they want to do. They think the market largely meets the need, but if you really want to make it special and do more with that login and that data, you need to own it. So we came up with the Ori Enterprise License. OpenAI is an Ori Enterprise License user where they basically use our binary that adds value for them and other OEL customers, and they can manage it themselves, and they can use the data from it themselves, and they can sand the edges and change the UX and change the UI and do it all on their own. And we're seeing a trend towards that where we have other customers, big banks that are doing the same. They want to self-manage. So
I wanted to press on a couple things there. You mentioned, you've said a couple times in this conversation across your work experiences, the importance of listening to customers and hearing what people want and need. And you mentioned that here in the Ori context here too. Clearly that's been a key part of your career. But specific to Ori and the products you're building today, do people want to control? Are you hearing this from customers? They want to control this because is it about user experience, or is it about security specifically, or is it about both? Like, is the need for control? I want to control rather than use a third party. Yeah. Is it more about controlling the experience, or is it I don't believe other people are going to be?
Yes, and more. Yeah. So. Look, it's hard for any identity is the easiest way in, right? So breaches are common, more common than any of us would like.
For sure.
And when you think about it, when you control your own virtual private cloud, when you're controlling your environment, you have greater control over the security of that easiest way in. When you think about finding the needles in the haystack around, is there an attacker in? Are they moving laterally? Guess where those needles, guess where those little indicators of compromise come from? Typically from my identity and the things that are happening with people trying to get into different systems. When you think about user interface and user experience, there are end-to-the-end types of things that people who want more control want to do that they can't do with black box vendors. When you think about observability on not just indicators of compromise, but maybe how traffic's affecting the network or what's happening across the globe. Observability is a challenge for identity and access management companies. There are lots of additional capabilities that companies of a certain size want and need to manage their own, including, you think about it in any enterprise software business, there are always a gazillion corner cases. Those gazillion corner cases, corner case number one might be really important to company X to address a certain segment of the market. And when you go back to the black box guys, they say, okay, I'll put it on the list. They can control that at this point, right? So if you want agility, and again, for us, you can use for free in the open source community. You can use fully managed where we take care of that, or just listening to customers and listening to what those that want control are saying. There's a lot more that segment of the market can do, and uniquely so with Ori. There really are no other companies that can provide each of those three options together.
Yeah. So I want to wrap up on this, and then I've got a couple closing questions for you, but I want to wrap up on Ori here because, the growth has been, like I watched you over the last year, and the growth has been, I won't share numbers here, but the growth has been amazing to watch, and you're clearly a growth-oriented leader. What have you guys gotten right on the growth trajectory, and then what are some of the public numbers you share? I think you probably do share some of your like the open source community members, which is really substantial. But.
Yeah. So you can see the numbers in the open source community from the repos. There are 30 to 40,000 projects. There's a lot of love with GitHub stars. I'd say we're now over 500 clients. In the open source community, we can see roughly 20 to 25% of the global 5,000 is using Ori in production. They're using open source, which is great, right? But if they need more, we would like to be, in a relationship where we can help them do more, and that's where we're going, with the company. I think the one thing we got most right in the last year since I've been there is just listening to the market and understanding what they need. And we came up with the Ori Enterprise license as a result of that. That's been a big part of the last year's growth. As we go forward, just had a conversation with the CEO of Cockroach Labs, which is our underlying database. When you think about where the world is going with scale requirements and compliance requirements, not only for businesses today like OpenAI, which is a global company with serving lots and lots and lots of users, but agents and agentic scenarios, the need for scale, for multi-region, for resiliency, so that doesn't fail, is really critical. Cockroach is a key part of our go-forward strategy, not only as a selection that runs is the database for the Ori network, but it's a key part of our strategy for the OEL as well.
It does kind of, for someone who's not in this world, it does kind of make my mind, get tired here when I think about agents giving access to other agents in a way that is like a little bit hard to imagine, like the agents giving access to other agents in an automated way, and just how many agents, like there will be obviously way more agents than there are humans.
Well, I think bot traffic has surpassed human traffic on the internet. There's a stat, and I don't want to quote it because I don't remember it exactly, but it's now 40-50% of all the traffic on the internet are bots, right? And if you add agentic into that, you have to think about the basic things. How do you know a good bot from a bad bot?
Right.
Well,
right.
Identity and access management is the beginning of that, right? Yeah. So being able to assign, via OAuth, have the ability to know who the agent is, know what the roles and permissions are that are granted to that agent, being able to audit that is a big part of that equation. And identity and access management players like Ori, we're uniquely suited to help solve that problem, because you just need Ori Hydra, which you can try for free, to solve that problem.
Yep. So fascinating. What has to go right? Last question here. What has to go right for Ori to be like a decacorn, a multi-billion-dollar? I'll say a multi-billion-dollar outcome. Like what? You've already got phenomenal growth. Like you've got the early trajectory right here. You've got a great technical team. Like what's the future have to look like, do you think, for you to deliver on what I know your ambition is, like to be a many billion company here?
Well, I think there are a lot of things that have to go right, but if I were to simplify to three, we need to grow our open source community and provide more value there. We need to provide more value to the companies, the enterprises, the startups, the mid-market companies that are using and paying us, to be a partner in that journey. And a big part of it is, bringing on the right people to get behind that mission. We have the opportunity to make identity and access management a lot easier, a lot more secure, a lot more scalable as the world is changing rapidly. And I think we've got a great opportunity to do that.
Great, I love it. And your last point is definitely not lost on me. Bring on, attract and retain top talent is always key to scaling any company. All right, closing questions unrelated to anything I missed on Ori, by the way, before I ask my last two.
We could talk for Ori. We can talk about Ori for the next hour. It's a fantastic company with the best engineers I've ever worked with.
Yeah, we didn't touch on this, but you also have phenomenal investors, Insight and Balderton, and we're happy to be a small investor in your most recent round, but and invest alongside such great investors. But Insight's just one of the very top software investors, obviously, and Balderton, of course, similar.
Yeah, look, and InQtel as well was early into Ori, and I appreciate you saying that. It's we have a tremendous support system with you all now being part of that as well. And I can't say enough good things about our venture partners. They're phenomenal. They've been great helping on all fronts, as have you as well.
Well, thank you. So 2 final questions here, unrelated to business. I always want to close with 2 questions. One, what is something you're grateful for in your life? I think it's easy to lose track of like the things we're thankful for.
Oh gosh.
And so
what am I not grateful for? Like it's, do you mean from a business perspective?
Any just in general, what's on your mind? Like what are you thankful for in your life?
Look, family, friends, my health, mentors, coaches, the fact that we live on a beautiful planet and can do the things that we want to do. If you wanted to drill into any one of them, there's so much to be grateful for. There isn't a day that goes by where I'm not thankful and appreciative for all of the things.
Yeah.
It's a great life.
Great life. Yeah. And then I'm secretly curating a list of taco shops in Arizona, and so although it's not so secret, if someone comes to town and you're gonna take them to Mexican food here, where do you take them in your corner of the world?
I was gonna say Taco Tuesdays at my house, right? But
Okay.
I don't think my kids, they go in and out of really loving or not loving the tacos that I make at home. But a go-to for us up in North Scottsdale is jalapenos.
Okay.
I don't know if you've been, but that's pretty darn good.
I'll have to give it a shot. So this last weekend, I bought a tortilla press and I made tortillas. I've never made corn tortillas before. So
how'd it go?
They were pretty good. I mean, I did the pre-run before the pre-run. I wanted to A/B test refine my recipe before I shared it with my family.
And how did the intro to the family go?
They loved them. I mean, look, the test is like a relatively low bar. I bought the best corn tortillas from the store that I could, and I said, hey, you can eat them out of the bag, or you can eat the ones I just came off of my griddle there, and no one ate any out of the bag. So that was like, at least I beat the store bought.
Yeah.
Like that was my bar. That's a relatively low bar.
Good for you. Now, one last question for you. Did you stack the deck saying you could eat the store-bought ones or you can eat mine?
No, set them both out together.
All right, so that's a fair test.
Yeah, and I went to the carniceria, bought some good meat, grilled that. But yeah, no, I'm always love Mexican food. Hey Jeff, thanks for everything you do for the local community in Phoenix, and you've been part of this community for so long in the tech community. Your experience and career is like there's so much to learn from, and great lessons learned here. And thanks for sharing it. Congrats on the success to date at Ori, and looking forward to what the coming years provide. But appreciate all you do.
Gregg, we appreciate you all being in Ori and appreciate you as well. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here.